Those are the magic words that we were trying to hear. So thank you, everyone. I'm gonna actually put this into slideshow presentation. Boom. My name's Joanna Laskus. I'm with the management team here at the Podcast Academy, and I'm super excited for everyone to be joining us today. Just have a couple quick housekeeping notes. Promise they'll be really quick. The most important one is thank you to Wondery, our community building sponsor. Our sponsors make all of what we do possible. So we really like to give shout outs to them anytime that we can. We have upcoming events. These are all posted on our website. Please make notes of these, go to our website, add them to your calendar. Many of them are open to non-members, like today's event. Many of them are exclusive to members. Just a couple quick reminders about some fun things that just happened. We held the Ambies in LA last month. It was wonderful and exciting. That is something that's open to members and non-members, but of course, being a member, you can vote for the winners, which is a great thing. We also, one of the most valuable benefits of membership is our mentorship program, where we connect members who have similar interests with maybe folks who are a little more advanced in their career. People can be mentors and mentees at the same time because everything is on a spectrum, right? So please go to our website, check out the details about that. If you are a member, sign up for our next session, which we'll start taking applications for this summer. If you're not a member, think about this as a really great reason to join. And if you are interested in joining, you can use the code JOIN24 and you'll receive 25% off of your first year of membership. So if you're not already a member, please go and do that. And everyone hopefully is following us on social media. These are all the places that you can find us. And with that, I will say thank you and I will stop sharing and I will turn things over to Arielle Nissenblatt, who is the Community Marketing Manager at Descript. And she is the founder of the Earbuds Podcast Collective, which is a podcast curation newsletter. She also currently serves on the Board of Governors of the Podcast Academy and is here today to talk to us. Thank you, Arielle, and thank you all so much for your patience while we got started.
Yay. Okay, we did it. We made it. Hi, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about video in podcasting. Should you do it? If so, how should you do it? I am going to make this conversation. I'm going to make this presentation as conversational as possible, with me just being on the screen. And by that, I mean, we're going to utilize the chat pretty heavily. I have a lot of questions for you to answer. You can feel free to answer those into the chat or, maybe take some notes yourself. This is really a workshop where we're figuring out if video in podcasting is right for you or for your clients. And we're going to get into all of that and so much more. And if you read the description, you'll also note that I was also going to explain my obsession with Beluga whales. So we'll get into that a little bit too. And in that spirit, would love to know, we did a little bit of where you're from and what you had for breakfast, but I want to do another icebreaker. So why don't you tell me into the chat, tell me your favorite animal as a kid. What was the animal that you drew a lot, or what was the animal that you wanted to, you wanted to have? And this is really just for fun, just to open up some conversation a little bit. And while you're doing that, I will share my screen. All right. Lovely. Polar bears, dinosaurs, dolphins and whales. Dolphins and whales were huge for people of my generation. I'm born in 92, 5th grade. For some reason, we all wanted to be marine biologists. Weird situation, but it is what it is. All right, so we are here today to talk about video podcasting. Should you do it? My name's Arielle. Let's get into it. All right. So a little bit more background on me before we begin. I always like to give a little context of who I am and why you should listen to me. So my name's Arielle. That's a picture of me. And that's a picture of a beluga whale. And the reason I like beluga whales is honestly because when I give presentations, I'm always scrambling for examples. And for some reason, my brain has been defaulting to beluga whales and coffee for the last like 5 years whenever I give examples. I don't know what it is. And I honestly, when I was a kid, didn't really love beluga whales that much. It's just for some reason what I do. So now I've kind of try to build them into every presentation that I do. And the reason I like to give examples is because I am the type of person who likes to learn with examples. So would love to know in the chat how you love to learn or how you tend to take in information best. Keith says, don't give coffee to your beluga whale. Yes, super. That's something that's going to apply to a lot of us. So I really appreciate the heads up there, Keith. But yeah, would love to know, do examples help you? And the reason I ask this is because I'm always looking to improve my, presentation skills and want to make sure that you are learning as I am teaching. Kinesthetic learning all the way. Lisa says that podcasting is so intergenerational, that you graduated college in 92. Love to see that. So I am the founder of Earbuds Podcast Collective, which is a podcast recommendation newsletter. Founded it in 2017 because I loved listening to podcasts, still do love listening to podcasts. I've already listened to about 4.5 hours of podcast today. Big fan of daily podcasts, big fan of news podcasts, history podcasts, those podcasts that are kind of like infotainment. And I am always looking for more and always looking to help other people find their next favorite podcast, but also to help podcast creators get their show into the ears of the perfect listener for them. So that's why I started that newsletter. If you are interested in subscribing to it, it's earbuds.audio. Always appreciate when folks find that newsletter. And the cool thing about it is that each week is curated by a different person and anyone can curate a list. So if you have a podcast, you can promote one of your own episodes. So again, earbuds.audio. I'll also have my newsletter at the end. I'll have my email address at the end so that you can email me with any questions. I also work at Descript, which is a transcript editor platform that helps you record video and audio and edit video and audio as if you're editing a Word doc. Just by a show of hands, I guess, feel free to type it into the chat. Have you heard of Descript and do you use Descript? Feel free to let me know. I manage the community there. We've got a lot of people who use Descript in the world, and they use it for different reasons. And sometimes it's people making video podcasts. Sometimes it's people making audio only podcasts. Sometimes it's people making videos, just videos, not podcasts at all. So really a lot of use cases out there. We're going to talk a little bit about Descript, but we're also going to talk about other ways to make video or to not make video, depending on where you fall on this video spectrum. There's a lot of questions here about Descript, which is great. I will again have my email address at the end of our presentation so that if we don't get to those questions today, we can. But I also want to encourage you to use the Q&A section in Zoom so that I can make sure to get to those questions so that I don't miss them. All right, so that's me, Earbuds and Descript. I also do some consulting on podcast marketing and growth and content strategy to a certain extent. Questions like, what should your podcast be about if you're looking to hit this type of audience? Is my podcast entertaining? How long should my podcast be? What hosting site should I use based on what kind of podcast I have? Other questions like that. I really like to keep up with what's going on in the world of podcasts and in the world of content creators, digital content creators, so that I can always have great answers for people at any stage of their podcasting or digital content creation journey. Cool. Next up. Here is what we're going to cover in the next 40-ish minutes, and we will, of course, leave time at the end for questions. We're going to cover who are you. I spoke a bit about who I am, and more of that will come out as we go on, but I would love to know who you are, so I'll have some specific questions about that. I'll ask you what brings you here today. We'll talk about the latest when it comes to video content creation, video podcasting, and who should have video in their podcast production and who should be avoiding video in their podcast production. Anything else that you'd like to cover, feel free to put it into the chat and I will try to get to it. But again, feel free to use the Q&A for any specific questions and we will dedicate some time at the end to that. All right. Here is our first order of business. Who are you? So I would like in the chat for you to tell me, I know a bunch of you, but it's always great to hear specifically who you are. So feel free to write in the chat your name. Do you have a podcast? Are you currently recording video? I would love to know. Feel free to, you don't have to give too many details. If you'd like to drop a link, that would be great. Would love to know your current use case when it comes to video podcasting or podcasting in general. Then we'll get into the why are you here? And that's when I'll ask a few more specific questions. But this, like I said, this is not going to be a very data-filled presentation. I'm not here to show you charts. I'm not here to show you tons of statistics, because what I find is that a lot of times in presentations about should you have video podcasts, should you have video with your podcast, a lot of times people like to pick and choose different stats in order to say you must have video or you should definitely not have video depending on what stage of the journey that you're at. And I think that there's a lot more nuance to it than that, which is why I'm here more so to ask you questions and to get you thinking. All right, so let me scroll up a bit and read some of these comments. Stephanie, you are a filmmaker and an artist. You have a podcast called Nosy AF where you share your art practice and interview artists and activists. Love that. Dawn Michelle is a producer and you have a podcast. I use video on my nonfiction shows. Lindsay has two podcasts, Charts and Hearts, the Whale Tales podcast. Love that. You do not use video for these. I am also a video editor, not currently editing video, but interested in learning more and offering it to clients. Great. Haley says, I record an audio podcast, have considered video, but am nervous to add such a large editing workload. Very, very good point. Seth says, yes, all of our podcasts now have video components. Keith says, I am the communications manager at Disability Rights Florida and co-host and co-produce our podcast, You First. We actually do record video, but only use it for creating social media clips. Jill is curious about video. Carmen says that they are the SP of Bloomberg's Old Lots podcast and have done video, but not currently filming. Just kind of skipping through a bunch of these. You have a podcast, just started with video, but it's definitely going to be a priority going forward. Got somebody here from Realm. Realm is really great. Talking about a few in development, figuring out the nerdy stuff like workflows and integrating with existing teams. Love that. Thank you all so much. And feel free, I'm not going to read through all of them, but everybody should read through these comments and definitely make sure to connect with each other because it sounds like there are some opportunities for folks to be collaborating. So if you see something if you see a keyword that stands out to you, maybe it could mean that you would be a good guest on their show, or they could be a great guest on your show. Make sure to reach out to each other. Okay, so it looks like we've got a lot of people here who are recording video and maybe using it for clips, or people who have been hearing that they need to be recording video or doing something with that video. Let me know how that sounds for you as we go on to the next question. What brings you here today? My sense is that a lot of people are here because of pressure. Let me know if that resonates with you. I think a lot of people go to conferences or see online, whether it's in blog posts or on YouTube, that, you know, in order to have a successful podcast in 2024, you've got to be video podcasting. Sort of it's what everybody else is doing, or it feels like everybody's sort of going in that direction. I'm here to dispel that rumor, but also to give you resources for if you do decide that you want to go in that direction. But I would love to know what brings you here today, why you decided to sign up for this presentation. Pressure. Lindsay says, my online video is a hot topic, but most of my clients don't care about it. Some ask, but it's rare. No pressure for you, Lisa. That's great. I'm here because I'm curious to know if I'm doing video right. Love that question, Matt. Would love to know what you're already doing for video. I also think for sure to have video for sharing. Got it. Got it. Lots of different questions there. Wondering if you can monetize video as well as audio. Great. So I will now back up a bit and tell you about my opinion on video for my own projects. So I currently host two podcasts that are in season. One is called Trailer Park, the Podcast Trailer Podcast. It is a podcast about podcast trailers. And each week we feature a podcast trailer that's been submitted to us. We play that trailer and then we give our opinion on that trailer. We say what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it, what was captivating, what could have been thrown out, what could have been edited out. And we do it because we want to help people make short form audio content. So we play really great trailers, we play some not so great trailers, and we kind of discuss the merits and why this trailer worked and why this trailer didn't work. But we also do it because we want to help people discover new podcasts. So we've been hosting the show. It's me and my co-host, Tim Villegas, since February of 2023, so a little bit more than a year. We did a short first season, just 8 episodes or so, but then our second season is a little bit more on the always on side. We don't really have an end date to it. And we featured trailers all over the genre spectrum. We've done true crime. We've also done, just straight up interview shows. We've done one about chess. We've done really anything. If you go to trailerparkpodcast.crd.co, you can check it out. You can also submit your trailer to potentially be featured. For that, what we did early on is we decided, because the conversation was happening before February of 2023, should we be recording video for this podcast? At that time, I was pretty staunchly against video for podcasts. I was really of the belief that I am somebody who likes to just listen to podcasts, and therefore, why should I be creating video for podcasts? And while I still personally like to just listen to podcasts, I have to recognize that there are people out there who like to be able to view a podcast or to be able to view a show as they are consuming it. And whether that's viewing the show in its entirety on YouTube or viewing clips of that show, that's definitely something that I have come to recognize and also contend with. So what we started out with was recording video, because when we record on Squadcast, you automatically can record video, and that's an easy yes, because you can decide later on what you want to do with that video. But we weren't doing anything with that video. This season, we are doing things with that video when we have time. And that's an interesting distinction that I will make from the other podcast that I'm going to describe in a moment. But for our trailer for season 2, we decided to make an audio version of that trailer and a video version of that trailer. We technically don't have a YouTube channel dedicated to Trailer Park, the podcast Trailer Podcast. I post everything on my personal YouTube account, and that is limiting to a certain extent, but I just decided it was not going to be for me to start my own YouTube channel for Trailer Park, the podcast Trailer Podcast. So if you are interested in checking out how we did that video trailer, you can go to my personal social media accounts, and I'll also feel free, I'll share those with you afterwards if that is of interest to you. What we do is we record on Squadcast. So we've got 2 separate cameras, and we then take that and we add some elements like captioning and a waveform and maybe some B-roll here and there in order to add some extra visual elements to it. So that's what we do for one of my podcasts. I have another podcast called Daily Tips That May or May Not Help You with Arielle and Ned. That is a daily podcast, 1 to 2 minutes each, where my co-host Ned Donovan and I share a tip that may or may not help you. And that is completely a video and audio podcast. And if you were to ask me, do you record it with video in mind first or audio in mind first? I'm just anticipating that could be a question. I honestly don't really know the answer, and I would be curious to know what folks think if they were to view and or listen to that podcast. That podcast is available on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. We post it on Twitter, we post it on LinkedIn, and we, of course, post it as a podcast. We use Red Circle to host that podcast. And what's interesting about that is the podcast initially it was our most high performing of all of the channels that we're in. And now by far, TikTok is our highest performing channel. So if you want to see how some of that looks like, you can go anywhere on social, Daily Tips Pod, to see how we do that. And we utilize templates from Descript, and we record in Squadcast for that. So I just wanted to give you a sense of my current state, what I'm currently doing with video as it relates to podcasting, and the overall sense that I have on my personal projects, because both of these podcasts are chat shows, and they're quick chat shows. You know, the Trailer Park, the podcast Trailer Podcast, is less than 15 minutes every episode. Daily Tips That May or May Not Help You is 1 to 2 minutes, sometimes up to 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So it's really, both of them are very quick. The video required for them does not take all day. We've gotten our workflows. Somebody mentioned workflows a few moments ago. We've gotten our workflows all squared away so that these things can be done quickly. And then what we have made a pact to do is, with daily tips that may or may not help you, is every quarter or so, we look at our highest performing videos and we try to figure out what worked and what did not work, and then try to double down on the elements that made the videos successful. So that's been interesting so far. We're just about at the 5-month mark of that podcast. I'm going to pause for a moment and read some comments, but feel free in the meantime to continue dropping questions in the Q&A. Or just keep the chat going. So Jeremy says, I started in video and enjoyed getting into podcasts because of the ways it's different from video. So it's been frustrating to have to, quote, accept that video might be a necessary item in the podcast bucket. Stephanie says, I also feel pressure to post on social media, but that's another webinar. That's true. And I can completely debunk social media as a necessary evil for you if you give me the time. Gerald says, pressure making video short clips for social media and YouTube. And Claire says, I watch your daily tips on Twitter, quick and breezy. I love it. Thank you so much. All right, let's go to our next slide. I want to talk about the latest and greatest. And like I said a few moments ago, I'm not here to show you graphs. I'm not here to show you statistics. I'm not here to word vomit for you the latest Edison research trends, the latest SiriusXM numbers. Why? Because I think in a lot of situations, and I say this a lot, so if you've seen me speak before, I apologize, but I'm very passionate about the following, which is that there's a lot of BS out there when it comes to advice. And I'm not here to continue on with that streak. And what I mean by that is I think there's a lot of people who are going to tell you, you got to have a video strategy when it comes to your podcast production workflow. And I just don't think that's the case, because there are a lot of questions you need to be asking yourself. And this is the questions portion. And this is the questions portion of our conversation. And it's where I'm going to ask you to either type into the chat answers to these so that you can hold yourself accountable. But if you'd not like to make this public, feel free to get out a piece of paper and start answering some of these questions. Or, of course, you can do it in your own head. I'm just going to take a sip of water first. A lot of questions coming your way. Okay. And the first question that I have for you is, do you watch podcasts? And you can answer that whether it's clips of podcasts or podcasts in their entirety. All right. Nope, a couple, yes. I don't know, actually. Only those that are filmed in a studio setting. Okay. So we are here indexing very high for podcast creators. So that, I think that's a reasonable assumption, is that we are also big podcast listeners. So if you said yes to that question, I would love to know what podcasts you tend to watch. And I'm not necessarily talking about scrolling through TikTok or scrolling through Instagram Reels and seeing the same clips here and there and then coming back to those clips. I'm talking about you make the time to always watch Call Her Daddy. You make the time to always watch your favorite sports podcasters. Maria says, nope, never watched a podcast. Will occasionally pause on a clip on Insta. Same. Fat Man Beyond broadcast their show live before releasing in the feed. That's super interesting. The Breakfast Club is probably the only show I could watch, but usually any YouTube podcast is just on in the background. Interesting. All right, so just wanted to get a sense from the crowd if you currently are watching podcasts. My next question is this. When you talk to friends who are not in the podcast space, do they tend to say they watch or listen to podcasts? Listen. Watch. Varies, of course. Both, but I'm surprised by the number of people who say that they watch. And Dana says, listen. All right, so a bunch of listens. And again, we are indexing very high for people who have selected to come to a Podcast Academy event. So you're probably very tapped into the podcast space. Your friends have probably been hearing you talking about podcasts for a long time. I know that a few years ago, if a friend told me that they watch a podcast, I'd be like, no, you don't. You can only listen to a podcast. And I've stopped doing that because of advice from Tom Webster, who says, who are we as people who are so tapped in to question how the majority of people consume this content that we love and create and hope more people love and create? We kind of need to accept that this is the way things are going. Maria says some use the word watch, but I assume they're making a mistake because they're not used to podcasts. Stephanie says, I even had a fellow podcaster say if a guest isn't ready to go on video, they reschedule the interview. Wow. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I've got a lot of friends who I think are definitely influenced by me and therefore say that they listen to podcasts, but I do have a few friends who say they watch podcasts and that they have it on in the background. So that's another question that I wanted to ask. My next question is this. When you record podcasts, do you tell your guests that you are going to be recording video? And this is usually relevant if you're recording on Squadcast or Riverside or Zencaster, where video recording is the default. What you do with that is sort of, up to you. And you may decide that you want to do something with that, and you might decide that that is not for you at all. So I'm just curious where folks are at right now. So EB says yes. Jeremy says they definitely tell them. Maria says yes, always to cover our asses with social clips because it's great to use them. Chad says yes. Chad says yes. All my clients recording video by default. Always mention that there's video present and it won't be recorded. Interesting. Great. Just reading some of these comments. Oh, Sarah Spring says yes, ours is recorded in a studio. So I guess it's obvious at that point when your guests come in that you are going to be recording video and doing something with that video. My next question is this. Do you enjoy recording video? And we'll throw editing. Do you enjoy recording and editing video? Matt says dislike with 3 exclamation points. I feel that. Yes and no. Dislike also. Oh my God, it takes so long, but I kind of like it. Getting more comfortable with editing video. Only just started to try and edit. It's kind of hard. Great. Yeah. Okay. The reason I asked this is because kind of the same answer that I give when people say, do I need to be on all social platforms? Do I need to be posting on every single social platform? I kind of give a similar answer to the question of, do I need to be recording video? The first question is, where is your existing audience? And you can feel free to answer these or not. I'm kind of going to run through them quickly. Where is your existing audience? Are they watching video? Where are they watching video? Where is the audience that you want? Are they on TikTok? Are they on LinkedIn? Are they somewhere else? Are they watching video? Do they care about video? Where do you like spending time? Do you like to be on TikTok? Do you like to be on Instagram? Do you like to follow the latest and greatest on LinkedIn video? LinkedIn, depending on if your show is business related. And do you want to be spending time there? And these are important questions because yes, it is possible that you'll have a video go viral and that video may get so many comments and have so much traffic flooding your site that a percentage of those viewers eventually become your dedicated podcast listeners. The likelihood of that is pretty low. There are some people doing some interesting anecdotal studies on this. One of them is Gary Arndt, who has a podcast called Everything Everywhere Daily. He was posting involved videos on TikTok for a while, and he reports that he does not see much of an increase if those videos go viral. But you can juxtapose that with, there's a podcast called Spooky Tales, hosted by a woman named Christina, who every once in a while has a video go mega viral on TikTok, and she does report that some of that virality trickles down to the podcast. If you want to learn more about that, Arielle Shapiro recently wrote an article for Hot Pod, which is from The Verge, about those two case studies and a little bit more information on their numbers. So I can share more information about that at the end. Just pausing now. Fred says, feels like video can be at odds with good sound. That's a good point. Stephanie says, I don't do video yet, so I'm not sure where to start. It just feels like I need to have video, so I want to be up to the times and current. Good point. So we will in a moment get to some resources. All right. So who is video podcasting for? I forget who it was that mentioned this. I think it was Dawn Michelle DM mentioned this a moment ago, that you do use video for some specific clients, but not all. So if you want to share a little bit more about that and how you decide between, that could be very helpful for us. The reason I say so is because if you have a podcast and it is an audio fiction podcast, it can be very difficult to animate that entire fiction podcast or make it so that it would be interesting, entertaining for people to watch as well as listen to. But there are some ways to maybe animate it without actual animations. For example, adding captions, adding waveforms, but not necessarily making it, spending tons of money and getting it animated with actual animation. Stephanie says, also older folks know how to find YouTube and maybe not a podcast player. That's a very good point. This is what people think the opportunity is. YouTube is great because it is the second most popular search engine in the world. People understand YouTube at this point. They know how to go to YouTube and type something in and find something that will entertain them. So that is definitely a point that a lot of people make when it comes to the quote unquote YouTube opportunity. So who is video podcasting for? We need to think about Gen Z. We need to think about the generations that are video first and that do tend to go and search for video. There are just more people on YouTube than there are on the podcast listening apps. And because of that, it makes sense to try to go viral on some of these platforms and hope that that virality points back to your podcast. But we need to be thinking about what our overall goals are, because you could go viral on TikTok repeatedly and maybe 1% of the people that view your video go and check out your podcast, and an even smaller percent of those people then become your regular listeners to your podcast. But you need to be thinking about where you want to grow your audience. Maybe the point is that people just find you in general. It doesn't necessarily matter where they find you. So think about what your overall goals are. Think about what your clients' goals are, whether you're making a podcast for yourself or if you're here representing some clients. I think a lot of people get hung up on, yes, we went viral on TikTok, but it didn't really translate to the podcast. I would venture to say that it's still pretty good that you got 1 million views on your TikTok. And that overall might have led to a bunch of clicks on your website and maybe some purchases of a course, depending on what you're selling, or maybe people are subscribing to your newsletter, but they're not necessarily becoming your podcast listener. And the reason for that could be manyfold, but one of them is this. If you go viral for a clip on TikTok and that clip is 45 seconds long, people really like you in that 45-second burst, they're not necessarily signing up right then and there to listen to a 45-minute interview between you and a guest. They want that 45-second clip. They like that 45-second clip. Moving people from 45 seconds to 45 minutes is a huge task. So it's about building up your reputation with this group, going viral consistently and continuing to bring value to the people that have decided to hit follow on your profile on YouTube, or to subscribe to your YouTube channel, or who follow you on Instagram, or who maybe follow you on LinkedIn. And they're seeing that you're consistently delivering value. And then over time, maybe they want more from you and they become your dedicated, loyal podcast listener because they want more from you. Keith says, we do publish to YouTube, but it's just with a static image, but we do that to add English captions and Spanish subtitles for accessibility, not as important with more podcast players supporting transcripts. That is very true. We'll get into that. All right, so who is video podcasting for? It really depends on your intended audience and your existing audience and where you want to be, how much time and bandwidth you have. Who should avoid video? If you are here and you're like, God, the thing that I loved about podcasting audio only was that I never had to put on makeup, or that I never had to worry about what I looked like, and I never want to worry about that, you don't have to do video. Nobody has to do video. There are always going to be people who want to listen to audio only, who don't necessarily care about viewing you or viewing your podcast or checking out clips of your guest. And I think it can be really obvious when people are phoning it in and trying video for a few episodes just to see. I think the first thing, and I give this advice all the time when it comes to podcasting, is you need to be a student of the craft first. You need to find some people to compare yourself to, some people that you think you have similar video equipment to, audio equipment to, similar views when it comes to content creation, content promotion, and see, those are your comps. Those are people that you can compare yourself to. Maybe some people that have similar numbers to you, people that podcast on similar topics, that video podcast on similar topics. Become a student of them. comment on their stuff, get into their communities, see what they do well, see what they don't do well, see what you would emulate if you were to go all in on video, and see what you would avoid. That will just give you a nice blueprint and also make you feel like you're part of a larger community. And that's a great way to figure out if this is going to be for you in the long term. I also think that you should avoid this if you don't have the bandwidth for it. And one way to figure out if you do have the bandwidth for it is to make for yourself a 1/4 commitment. If you do decide that video podcasting is going to be a thing that you try, do it for 3 months, give it a fair shot, put everything into it that you can put into it. And then at the end of those 3 months, check out your analytics, check out your statistics, maybe put out some sort of survey to your listeners, to your subscribers. Did they enjoy these videos? Were they helpful? Did they add, or did they detract? Or did they even know that you were putting out video? And then you can decide what you want to do with that information. What's the point of all of this? I sort of alluded to this a moment ago, and feel free, if you have an answer to this, feel free to dump it into the chat. What is the point of this entire conversation when we discuss video? It's all about getting our podcast out to a larger audience. And whether that podcast stays audio in addition to video, or that podcast eventually becomes more of a play for video, and you're just also distributing via RSS so that if people want to, they can listen to your podcast. Great. I think it's all about sending people to your podcast or to your client's podcasts. I think for a lot of the people who are here on behalf of their clients, who might want to be convincing their clients to record video and to edit video, it's because that's more expensive, and that's great because that means that you can charge them for more. But it also means that you might go viral. It also means that you might build up an audience of people that want to view you. It also means that, like, even if you're never going to get 50,000 downloads per episode, maybe you can get a couple more thousand downloads per episode because you went viral a few times on TikTok or on YouTube or wherever it is. You're bringing those people to your website, and 2% of those people buy your client's course. Great. That's an audience that you might not have had otherwise. No question that YouTube expands your reach, says Larry. Yes, I think if you optimize for YouTube, then it can be a great way to potentially reach some new audiences. But just throwing your video up on YouTube and hoping for the best does nothing. And I can tell you anecdotally, but for a fact, my fact, that Trailer Park, the podcast Trailer Podcast, the show that I was referring to before, where I just throw a YouTube video up every single time, it does nothing for me. You can see that. If you search for my name, you'll see I post all of those videos because OSHA is my podcast hosting provider, and it allows me to just click a button and automatically publish to YouTube. It gives it a waveform, and the captions are auto-generated from YouTube, and it does nothing for me. We get almost no views. So you do, unfortunately, need to put some time and effort into it if you want people to go to YouTube and actually view your videos. So what's the point of all this? It's about audience growth. It's about audience growth. It's about potentially reaching new people who are hanging out on YouTube and who are hanging out on YouTube, hanging out on TikTok, hanging out on the places where video is currently popular, and hoping that those people want to stick with you or stick with you beyond just one clip, moving them from 45 seconds to 45 minutes. So let's talk about some resources for video creators. Obviously, I come from the Descript side of things, which is a really great way to record and edit video. But I'd love if folks are currently recording video, feel free to throw your resources into the chat. We can share some resources here. I'll go through my workflow very quickly, and then we'll make sure we have a few moments at the end for questions. So I record video. Let's use daily tips that may or may not help you as our example. We record on Squadcast. My co-host Ned and I, we batch record. It's a daily podcast, so we try to get a bunch of we try to record a month in one sitting. Usually it takes about 2 hours. We record on Squadcast. We then bring our files into Descript. One click of a button brings the files into Descript. We then separate all of our files into the different days of the week. And we go about setting our video and our audio into templates. So what we like to do there is we very much, we love to keep our brand consistent. So our cover art is purple and yellow. So we like to have our captions and our waveforms and other elements that we throw into our video. We like to make sure that that is branded. so that people have a consistent eye when it comes to checking us out on the internet. Even if we decide to clip something within our shorter clips, so we, like I said, our podcast is 1 to 2 minutes long every day. Sometimes I'll go in and I'll grab 30 seconds. And even when I grab 30 seconds to make that into another clip, I make sure that I am staying consistent with font and with color and any other branding elements that I have. So that's it for my workflow. I really just use Squadcast, and then I use Descript. I know a lot of people also like to use CapCut in order to get some quick captions. Another popular one lately is why am I forgetting the name of this? Opus Clips is another interesting solution to generate clips very quickly. But I'll also say that they have an element on Opus Clips that I don't think is necessarily as helpful as it is intended to be. The idea is if you go to, I think it's opus.pro, you can upload an existing YouTube link and it'll then separate that YouTube link into 10 smaller videos, and you can edit those videos as you please, and it gives them a virality score. And you can then within that make your changes, change the font, the captions, things like that. Descript recently launched an interesting AI feature called Find Good Clips. So if you go into Descript and you have your entire video or audio set out, you can then ask it to, hi Ty, good to see you. You can then ask it to find good clips, and then you can specify what you want. So do you want 5 clips from within your entire hour-long interview? Do you want those clips to be 20 to 30 seconds long? And you can specify a few other things. It uses ChatGPT to do these cuts, and then it'll identify those clips within your transcript, and then you can go about creating your video and your audiogram from there. So really interesting thing to do. For the folks in here who use Descript, let me know if you've tried that out before. Feel free to type it into the chat if you've played around with Find Good Clips in Descript. And again, feel free to share your video resources that you like to use. There is a really great blog post that I will grab at the end of this about if you're interested in your own desk setup. Right now you can see I've got not such a great setup. It's very busy in the background. I've got light streaming in through here. I could kind of look washed out. I do have a ring light up on top of me that helps offset the back over here, but this hand should not be, being washed out over here. So I'm gonna, in a moment, grab that blog post so that you can learn about lighting within your own home studio or elsewhere. And also some interesting tips that you can share with your guests to help them light their rooms, even if they're not in a professional studio. Larry says that they use Zencastr and Hindenburg Pro. Video.ai is another one, says Ty. Yes, and I will definitely share that blog post. All right. All right. We sort of alluded to this throughout, but what to expect from video podcasting? Much larger question. I'm sure we'll get to some of that when we get to our questions, so I'll leave that for now. And then I just wanted to share my email address so that if folks have questions for me, you can feel free to send me an email. That's my Descript email. I'm very available there and very happy to answer questions beyond just our conversation now. So I am now pulling up the Q&A and I will get to all that. All right. So Seth says, my question for Arielle, when I say podcast, people usually assume I'm referring to an audio only product. Is there a better term you use to make it clear that a show is both audio and video? It's a really great question. And I think this is something that over time will become more clear. But for now, I usually just say show, just the larger, it's a larger show. Capital SHOW. And I don't necessarily think it matters that that show is not available in the same way that a show is available on Netflix. I think overall people are understanding that we can consume different things in different places. So if you want to say podcast, I do think people assume it's audio only, but if it's a show and if it's something that's searchable on YouTube, people tend to understand that. Larry says, looking to expand our podcast reach and figure out if YouTube is the best way to do that. Should be able to cut down on video editing time by not using video per se, but only static slides as illustrations at certain places during our discussions or interviews. Check out the podcast, Well, There's Your Problem, for example. Great. definitely check that out, folks. I'm just trying to find the question from within that and see if I can reply to something specific within there. I will say that static slides and captions and let's say waveforms do make your video a little bit more interesting. And that's a good way potentially to get somebody to pay attention to the YouTube video, but more likely than not, they'll just have it on in the background, which is not the worst thing. Like I said, if they are consuming it, that is better than nothing. You can also use B-roll. You can also use different images and GIFs and things like that. And you can do a lot of that right within Descript if you're using Descript already. Joelle says, curious what elements you've opted to double down on due to performance and which things you've stopped or minimized. That's a great question. At the beginning of my presentation, I said that I usually do experiments with some of my podcasts. So I'd like to, if something is going well, I'll double down on that. If it's not going well, I'll shy away from it. Something that I have decided to double down on is with daily tips that may or may not help you. I have cut out my ums, buts, and ahs because the show is so short, 1 to 2 minutes each. I think people are there because it's quick. I think people are there because they get one tip that may or may not help them every single day, and they don't necessarily need me and my co-host puttering around what that tip is. And because of that, I have decided to shirk the authenticity element for the give them what they need element. So sometimes the tips come a little bit quicker. We don't do as much of an intro as I would on another podcast, but that is what I've learned that people want and need from this, mostly due to feedback from TikTok, where we're the most popular. Keith says, I find that the podcasts I watch are ones that were done in a studio setting with sets, props, etc. Our podcast is done through Squadcast, and wonder what value there is to publishing a video version where it's just us talking on a webcam, because I wouldn't watch. That's a good point. And for that, I would recommend surveying your audience or somebody else made this point. I think it was Larry. People do go to YouTube to search for things. And my guess is, Keith, that your demographic might use YouTube to search for the topics that you're podcasting about. So you might want to try hitting some of those keywords and making an SEO play. And therefore, it might be worth it for you to just have a video version where it's just you talking on a webcam. Maybe then you can throw in some B-roll or some other elements and see if you can have some success there. Claire says, do you think video is attractive to investigative/scripted shows, or is it more for chat shows? Is there data on this? There is probably data on this. I don't have that off the top of my head. I would not venture to make something up for you. I will say, I think, again, it depends on what you're going to be doing with that video. Is it going to be people in the studio recording? Is it going to be just face to camera? Or are you also going to throw in, like, if you're talking about, let's say, an investigation that took place in Louisiana, are you maybe showing some B-roll of that town in Louisiana? That could make it a little bit more interesting, could be interesting to experiment with, but I don't have the data off the top of my head. All right. Stephanie says, I have a podcast editor. Seems like Squadcast Descript is only for folks editing on their own. Can I still use Squadcast, and can I insert voice memos or reference clips inside Squadcast? Like, if I have a listener question I want to play on my show, can I upload that in Squadcast? So anybody can use Squadcast Descript. You can definitely use it at any stage. It's whether it's you're editing your own or if you are offloading that video, that workflow to somebody else. Right now, you cannot insert voice memos live, but you can insert them in post-production. Larry says, doesn't the video question partly depend also on how your listeners consume your podcast? Do they sit passively and listen slash watch, or do they just listen while they're doing another thing? Yes, that's a really good point, which is why in my question portion, I made sure to say, where is your current audience and where is your intended audience? Where is the audience that you want to hit? If you want to find people who tend to be on YouTube, it might be worth being on YouTube. And if you want to find out if your existing audience would also like to watch your podcast, the only way to know is to ask them. Stephanie says, I already have a YouTube channel. Do I need to start a YouTube channel just for my podcast? I hope not. I don't want to, LOL. This is my favorite piece of advice. You should not do anything that you don't want to do. And I mean, truthfully, I don't know unless I am able to check out your YouTube channel. My main rule of thumb here is it depends how far your podcast is from the content that you tend to podcast about. So if your YouTube channel is all about like your personal diary videos that you've made, and then your podcast is about like business, I would separate them, but it really just depends. I wouldn't know unless I have more information. All right, a few more questions. I'm going to try to hit all of them. Stephanie says, I know a lot of this video podcast stuff is for YouTube, but can we post our video podcasts anywhere else? Yeah, you can do whatever you want. You can post them on TikTok. You can post them. TikTok obviously has a limit. I know they were experimenting with longer video platforms, but it's just that YouTube has been around the longest, which is why we have the most information on it. And YouTube has plans to integrate RSS in the future. They recently, just a few days ago, did a session on what that is going to look like. So if you're curious about that, feel free to email me and I'll send you the details. I think they've written a lot about it, and they've also put out a bunch of slides where you can get more information, and they're often at the podcast conferences doing live events and answering questions like that. But yes, you can post your videos anywhere that will take them, as long as they're oriented in the correct way. EB says, I have to pull and replace the YouTube video I posted yesterday. Will that screw up the link that I already produced a short code for? And do I have to delete/redo the entire post? So you should be able to, within YouTube, replace the video. So don't delete it, just go and replace the video. Chad says, do you think the YouTube algorithm finally answers the discoverability question we always talk about in podcasting? I think that if that were true, it would have happened already. I think it depends. And when we are able to fully integrate RSS or fully ingest RSS via YouTube, that will help a little bit more. But I really think it depends how people are searching for the content that they're searching for. Like, not every YouTube video has huge numbers, or not every YouTube channel has huge numbers, even though it might be really a popular or really like a really well done video series. And that's just because there are a lot of content creators out there. And yes, there are a lot of consumers, but only so many hours in a day. Dana says, do you think a video podcast on YouTube needs to have B-roll, or is video of the conversation enough? Our podcast is interview style. I would need to know more. I hate to give blanket advice. My thought here is that I would need to know more. I would also ask your guests. I would definitely use multicam, so go back and forth between view of the 2 people speaking, or the 3 people speaking, or however many people, and then also the person who's making their point. And maybe if they're making a really strong point, you zoom in, you zoom out, try different tactics that would keep a potential viewer engaged. EB says, and is 720 okay versus 1080 for the YouTube version if no one is really watching intently? Yeah, absolutely. Most people cannot tell the difference. Most people don't know the difference between that. Of course, if you speak to somebody who is really great at video, they're going to say use 4K, but not everybody has that. And I'm here to give you the permission to do what works for you, while you can do it when you have the bandwidth for it. Later, if you want to step up your game, you can absolutely step up your game. All right, those are all of the questions. I'm just going to look one more time at the chat and see if there's anything else. I'm probably not going to be able to get to all of this. My email address is still up here. I hope I've received a few emails, and I hope that I will receive more emails. And I hope that some of you have made some connections with each other. I hope also that you join the Podcast Academy if you're not already a member. There's a really great Slack channel that I'm a part of there that we are always just trying to educate people on podcasting and this industry. And our real goal for the Podcast Academy is to further professionalize this industry. So you can help us do that by becoming a member.
Thank you so much, Arielle. That was amazing. And as someone said, like, your breadth of knowledge is just fantastic. And we're really grateful for you sharing with us. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Okay.
And